Charles Lohrmann is the editor of Texas Highways magazine, the travel magazine of Texas. Welcome to the Bibliophile.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you in Texas.
We are here to explore the literary attractions of Texas, and you've kindly put together for us a list of your top 10 literary destinations in Texas.
Yes, and I'm going to cheat a little bit because I'm going to combine multiple locations, and I'm also going to expand your definition a little bit to say literary and book lovers destinations, because some of these are somewhat more historical than purely literary. So I'll just dive in if
Please
you think
do.
so. And one thing to keep in mind in terms of making these destinations attractive is that virtually all of them sponsor either exhibits, events, readings, symposia. So there's a little bit of research ahead of time, a little planning will often make it possible to visit at the time when someone has a particularly interesting presentation going on that might be worth the time. I'll start with the University of Texas at Austin, and as I said, I'm going to combine 5 locations here. We have, first, I'm going to mention the Harry Ransom Center, which is a remarkable repository of literary manuscripts, personal effects, and many collections of photographs, film. It's very diverse holdings here.
Yes, I know, for example, they have all of the John Lane correspondence, British publisher, turn of the century, and I'm just looking at this lovely spread you've got here in one of your more, is it a recent edition? Okay, and I notice here this is the Golden Cockerel logo, so they must have a pretty good collection of that fine press as well. But I think the point is that it's an extraordinary depth and breadth of their collection. It makes it a destination.
It's a destination itself, partly because of the exhibits which they have always moving through the galleries there, but also because this collection is essentially open to the public. With a brief orientation session and the guidance of the curators, researchers can go in and actually sit at a viewing table and have these amazing objects, documents, collections, manuscripts brought to them, either to just examine or to actually read and study. So that's remarkable.
And they don't have to be scholars or
no, you do not have to be a scholar. You only have to bring an ID and
an interest.
And an interest, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's all available, and they have literally millions of items that are available. The only limit is your time in terms of what you can see there. I think right now Tennessee Williams is a focus of their activity, and also Woodward and Bernstein, the reporters who broke the Watergate story, are actually in town now, and Robert Redford is here. Yesterday did a presentation about not only the story itself, but also the making of the movie, the film, All the President's Men. So that's an example. And interestingly, they were just able to release additional notes of their interviews with Alexander Haig, Nixon's last chief of staff, because he just passed away last year, so they were able to then make that public. So it's an ongoing revelation of content there. Another collection is the Dolph Briscoe Center for American History, which also holds extensive historical material, some dealing with the early years of Texas as a republic, and also the Spanish influence in Texas, which was more than 2 centuries before Texas became a republic. And then there's the Benson Latin American collection, the Michener Writers Center, which is actually in J. Frank Dobie's house, and he's sort of the literary father of Texas, and also the Paisano Ranch, which is there's a writer in residence program there. And the Paisano Ranch and the Writers Collection aren't as open, but they do sponsor events also.
And this is all in Austin?
This is all in the university area. Well, the Paisano Ranch is just a few minutes south of here, 15 minutes south of Austin.
Okay.
So it's the University of Texas system, but it's called the University of Texas at Austin. Then, not far from here is the Catherine Ann Porter's house in Kyle. It's a destination in the sense that certainly readers of Catherine Ann Porter's work will want to, but they also sponsor readings and special events. Another large collection is the Southwestern Writers Collection, developed by Bill and Sally Whitliff at Texas State University in San Marcos. And there, the sort of kernel, the beginning of that collection was a collection of J. Frank Dobie's personal possessions, but also it's grown since then. But it now includes the work of many regional writers. John Graves is a well-known example of that.
That's just about 30 miles.
That's in
south
San Marcos, Texas State University, 30 miles from Austin.
Great.
Exactly, about halfway between Austin and San Antonio. And then, as far as a big event, the Texas Book Festival takes place every fall, which is typically mid-October to early November, but literally hundreds of writers, and they do sponsor events throughout the year, but that takes place on the Capitol grounds here in Austin. It's a book fair, musical performances, but the centerpiece, I suppose you'd say, is visits, lectures, panels from every imaginable type of writer, from the pure fiction to history, even children's books. I mean, every possible genre and style of writing is covered. And so some of those events, as you can imagine, are in big rooms like the Senate chamber or the House chamber. Others are in small committee rooms. It will be a more intimate discussion. But the interesting thing is the writers are as accessible as they can be, depending on the limitations of the crowd. So that's good.
And that's a pretty good time to visit this part of the world, too.
It is a perfect time to be in Austin. Sometimes we do get some rain then, which is always welcome, but it's typically a little cooler. The summer has moderated somewhat. The heat is not quite so intense, but I mean, we've had people. I introduced a writer from Rhode Island who had been in Russia. He was a New York Times writer, and he was so happy to have the heat, because they had not really. It was already cold in the Northeast. For some people, the visitors, the heat is a welcome thing. So that's a good one, the Texas Book Festival. And then another place I'm going to mention that has multiple locations is the Fort Worth Cultural District, which includes the Kimball Art Museum, the Amon Carter Museum of American Art, and the Modern Art Museum of Fort Worth. And those are 3 museums, and there are more actually there. There's Botanical Gardens is nearby, and a Natural Science Museum as well. And here again, this is more of a book lover's destination, in the sense that each of those museums has a wonderful bookstore or gift shop that has extensive book collections of books available. Again, typically art books, but it's just such a wonderful site, and those museums are really worth the time. On a smaller scale, in West Texas, I like the Marfa Book Company, and I would suggest someone stop on a trip to Marfa, which is, again, the home of the Chinati Foundation, Donald Judd. It's a major sort of arts destination for West Texas.
Whereabouts is that again?
That's in directly north of the Big Bend National Park. Out if you go straight west from Austin, it's almost straight west, but it's about 6 hours driving, so it's about 400 miles, I guess you'd say.
Straight west.
Straight west,
okay.
And it's out in that Big Bend region, the Trans-Pecos region, north of the park, north of the actual Big Bend National Park and State Park. But there's Marfa, Fort Davis, Marathon. Those are 3 small towns that are certainly wonderful to visit. And the Marfa Book Company has become kind of a community center for the arts, literature, some community events as well, some political. Plus, it's a bookstore, so that's good too. There's almost always something going on there every week, nearly every weekend. So
okay.
It's a good place to stop. I encourage people to stop by there as the first stop, because then any other events in town will either be noted there, or there'll be a poster or a flyer, or there'll be information there. So that's a good place to stop when you're out in that area. And back here in Austin, Book People, the store, is one of the larger independent bookstores. And again, not just a big multi-floor bookstore, but with a coffee shop, but also readings almost every day, but at least 2 or 3 days a week, and every weekend, and of Jimmy Carter, historians, politicians, fiction, poetry. They do the entire range. Brazos Books in Houston, another really wonderful destination. Larry McMurtry's booked up in Archer City,
yeah.
which is a huge collection of books in his sort of native territory, native landscape up there. And a kind of a quirky destination is a beauty salon bookstore in Jefferson called Beauty in the Book, and the proprietress of that operation also sponsors a festival, and that's an interesting little, if you find yourself in East Texas, east of Dallas, and I guess you'd call it the northeast quadrant of the state. It's a very picturesque town as well. East Texas is considered more the south versus the west. In other words, they say Fort Worth is where the west begins, and Dallas is more the south, and so East Texas has more of a southern sensibility, I guess you'd say.
Is this festival? Does it last for 2 or 3 days? Or?
You know, I have not taken part, but yes,
okay.
it's a weekend is what it is, and she has multiple iterations of it. So I think that, again, a little research, a little planning.
Yeah.
She has a website.
And what's it called again? Sorry?
Beauty and the Book.
You've featured a lot of these places in your magazine, Texas Highways. There's quite the picture of this woman, Kathy Patrick. Is that it? She's got this beautiful leopard skin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, outsized personality. It's definitely flashy. Her interesting story is she had worked her way through college, cutting hair. I mean, as a hairdresser, and so she just kept that alive. And she's obviously very down to earth, matter of fact, kind of a no nonsense kind of person. But again, shares a passion, enthusiasm for books and writing, and shares that, and really builds that in others. So that's a good thing.
And it's funny. This just strikes me as so appropriate for Texas. I don't know why.
Well, no, it is. It's because she's a big personality.
Yeah.
Not following a conventional sort of academic approach or a stereotypical literary approach, but no less enthusiastic. And honestly, in terms of the impact, she's a disciple, I suppose you'd say, in terms of spreading the word.
Great. Okay.
So, and then one last place I'll mention, which is another kind of quirky one, is Robert E. Howard, who lives in a little town called Cross Plains. And he's the creator of Conan the Barbarian, which is, I guess that's a stretch to call that a literary destination, but it's an interesting, again, an event that has a cult following in Texas. Again, I would recommend that anyone just spend a little time to get some background and find out when these events are taking place, to take advantage of these collections, these museums, because my experience has been they're very eager to share their collections and interests and welcome visitors. So,
well, and that's exactly what we're doing with the literary tour. We'll have contact information for all of these different destinations, so that visitors can plan their trips around the dates that these things take place. It sounds to me like Austin really is the literary destination in Texas, and that would be a good hub base.
A starting place, certainly.
Yeah,
and it's
terrific. Well, that's exactly what we were looking for.
Well, good.
I've been speaking with Charles Lohrmann, who's the editor of Texas Highways, the travel magazine of Texas, based in Austin. Thanks again.
Ooh.